Welcome back. Whenever I get a chance to say welcome to our next guest, it's always a big day for me. His name is John Mills. He's one of the smartest guys I know on matters of national security writ large. He's got a wealth of experience, notably accumulated during his services as a special operator in the United States Army, specializing in psychological warfare. Rose to the ranks of colonel in the Army before he retired and became a civilian leader in the Pentagon on matters involving, among other things, cyber security. Very hot topic. These days, I'm proud to say he's a senior fellow of our Center for Security Policy and a very active contributor to the public policy debate about these matters, both here and elsewhere. John Mills, welcome back, sir. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you, Frank. Always an honor to be with you.
Thank you. Let me start with the president's trip to Asia. One of the focuses of that trip, I think, has to be the threats that persist and may, in fact, be intensifying from China towards Taiwan. And John, you've done a lot of work as a member of our Committee on the Present Danger of China on what we need to deter such an attack. We've just had a wonderful webinar with Dr. Stephen Bryan and Grant Newsom and former Deputy Undersecretary of the Navy, Seth Cropsey, talking about specific actions that we need to take to not repeat the mistake that we made with Ukraine, which was arming them after the invasion rather than before in a way that might have deterred it in the first place. Talk us through what we should be doing in this regard and what instead we are doing at the moment.
Well, thank you, Frank. As opposed to Ukraine, we have established law, the 1979 Taiwan Relations Act, which few who say they are experts bother to keep handy or at least refer to. It says we will provide defensive weapons to Taiwan, among other things, and defend Taiwan from active hostilities or coercion. It doesn't say we will quibble with Taiwan over what they get, which is exactly what's going on, unfortunately. And there's two recent sales that I think are extremely disappointing. I've had conversations with senior officials among the parties, and let's just boil it down very simply. The Biden administration has effectively pocket vetoed artillery to Taiwan and the best anti-submarine warfare helicopter in the world, our own SH-60, modified, of course, for export control reasons. Now they'll say, well, we didn't really pocket veto, and it was really Taiwan that withdrew it, and blah 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 blah. I'm sorry, we have attached so many conditions, and we want them to buy asymmetric weapons to become a porcupine. Good idea, good strategy. These other weapons are considered prestige. Since when I took over the Taiwan portfolio in 2014, I got it. However, prestige weapons have immense deterrence value. Maybe the Ukrainian invasion would have never happened if Ukraine, which was much less much less equipped, trained, and organized than Taiwan, if Ukraine had these weapons. These prestige weapons
Before the invasion.
Yeah. These are so important if Taiwan had them. Yes, Taiwan needs to overall increase its defense budget, which they have been, but Taiwan, please spike it upward. But prestige weapons and asymmetric weapons are both important.
But let me ask you, John, one particularly troubling development, as I understand it, and I gather the administration is quibbling about this point too, is that some equipment, prestige weapons or otherwise, that the Taiwanese actually had bought and paid for was diverted to Ukraine instead of being delivered to them at this moment. Is that right? And what is the explanation for that?
Yeah, we're really referring to the 155 millimeter. It's a howitzer field artillery piece. There was a lot of components. All this stuff is on the DSCA website in detail, and I've data mined that, gone through it, talked to a number of senior officials. There's a number of components there that are the same kind of components that are needed for the Ukraine. And when you put everything in context, yes, a lot of those components are essentially being diverted to Ukraine
Mhm.
at the cost of Taiwan. So this is not right. If we have a supply chain issue there, then let's ramp it up.
Yeah.
We're using the Defense Production Act for baby formula. I think we can
Yes, we
use the
are.
DPA for artillery too.
Especially at a moment when it might make all the difference in deterring the Chinese. And some of this is not just about calculations of weapons capabilities, it's about their perception of whether we're serious about defending Taiwan. And we need to be impressing upon them that we're deadly serious, that we stand with Taiwan. And again, not just because of this, well, relatively ancient legislation, but because of a commitment, a shared commitment to the security of Taiwan. Let me switch gears. We've been talking about Ukraine a bit, John. One of the upshots of Russia's invasion of Ukraine is it's caused a lot of people on the periphery of Russia to now be very concerned that they may be next, specifically the Finns, who have a long border with Russia, and the Swedes next door have asked to, on a rather urgent basis, to join NATO. Now, that's being gummed up at the moment by the Turks. What's going on there? And is this an advisable enlargement of NATO as you see it? And is it likely to happen?
Well, I think it's logical in many ways. Now, there we have some that are kind of saying, "Well, look, that just increases the huge size of NATO versus Russia." Let's put that aside. Finland and Sweden, I think are would be valuable members of NATO. Before I retired from government in February of 18, I had urgent requests and engaged in dialogues with both the Finns and the Swedes because I can't go into any detail, but them reaching out to us and asking for dialogue in a very with alacrity is insignificant. This is several years ago, so they saw danger coming. So Finland and Sweden joining are good. What is really interesting in this matter is the behavior of Erdogan and Turkey. Now, he is definitely. If you like the Ottoman Empire, get ready. Here comes Ottoman Empire too, because that's what Erdogan is all about as a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, his concern. I think this is actually very interesting. Everybody should pay attention to this is that Finland and Sweden have been essentially giving aid and comfort to the PKK, which are the bad Kurds. This is a terrorist organization operating in Turkey and Iraq. The PKK are not good people. They are bad. Erdogan is citing that. How true it is, I don't totally know yet, but it's actually very interesting. If Finland and Sweden have been providing aid and support to the PKK, that's not good, and Turkey, as a member of NATO, has a perfect right to raise that concern.
Mhm. Will it likely hold to that and obstruct through, you know, blocking effectively consensus in NATO on this enlargement to the perhaps detriment of these two nations? And I'm with you, John. I think this is an important addition. You look at a number of NATO nations that aren't really capable of making much of a contribution to the common defense. The Swedes and the Finns could. I think it's fair to say. Um, I just would also mention as an aside, John, one of the other concerns that I have, not so much Erdogan, but that I have about particularly the Swedes, is they've taken in huge numbers of Sharia adherent Muslims. And not all Muslims are a problem, but the ones who believe that Sharia is divine writ know that it commands them to engage in jihad, and we've seen it taking a terrible toll on Swedish society. So there are many levels of interplay at work here. Erdogan doesn't like the PKK allegedly operating or getting support, at least from the Swedes. I don't like the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamists getting safe haven in Sweden, and I think a lot of Swedes are very uncomfortable with it too. But net, uh, it does seem as though it would be advisable to have these two nations inside NATO if we could. Quick take on it. Do you think that the Turks will hold the line on this, or they're just haggling over the price of admission?
Well, good question. I mean, bottom line, I concur with your point of view on this here. I think Sweden and Finland need to come clean. The Islamification of Sweden is a crisis.
Mhm.
Stockholm is becoming a massive no go zone. It is psycho out of control. The Swedes have got to resolve: are they just want to remove themselves from the gene pool and disappear, or are they going to fight for Sweden? They got to fight for
Mm.
Sweden because it's being occupied from the inside out right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Finland, not as much a case as far as the Islamification. I love the Finns and the Swedes. I worked with them in Bosnia. I think they're incredible forces. Sweden's got to decide whether they want to continue to be a country or they're just going to
Mm.
hand it over to the Islamification. The Finns are awesome, great sharpshooters. Would never go against them in the snow.
Mm.
They're incredible. So I would welcome both. They do have to come clean on what's going on with the PKK and other support.
But
Erdogan's
last quick question: Erdogan is going to stick to this objection, do you think, or
I think he's going to push
keep
it.
it
He
bought
is a
off?
deal maker. He's been really essentially noodling and playing a lot in the Ukraine. A lot of what's getting to the Ukrainians is actually coming through non-US means. And so I'm not
Right.
pointing at any countries, but Turkey has been very active. We'll just leave it at that.
Okay. John Mills, we'll leave it at that. And thank you for your time today, sir. As always, we so value your visits with us and look forward to the next one in the very near future. In the meantime, thanks for what you do with us these days at the Center for Security Policy. That's deeply appreciated as well. Next up, we're going to talk about the surrender of our sovereignty with former Assistant Secretary of State Robert Charles right after this.